Chapter 4 of our course text deals with perceiving others. So it talks about the perception process. That's the first segment that I'll deal with in this video. The second segment is about influences on perception. The third one is common tendencies in perception. And then the fourth and last one is synchronizing our perceptions. Let's get started with the first segment, the perception process. Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa and who has since passed away, unfortunately, was fond of saying, where you stand depends on where you sit. So he knew that issues were framed by one's perspective on life, one's unique vantage point or perspective on life. And so we realized that no one views the world in exactly the same way. What that means is that our interpersonal relationships are affected by the way we communicate. We use communication to share meaning that's very different at times. So reality is constructed through communication. What that means is that the world is going to appear very different to each of us. It's not going to appear exactly the same. So let's look at the perception process and unpack it a little bit. The first one is that reality is socially constructed. We create reality by our communication with others, by our interaction with others, by our relationships with them. Two types of realities. The first is first order reality, and those are the physical, observable qualities of a thing or situation. You might be listening to me, and as you are, you realize I speak with an accent. Second order realities involve our attaching meaning or assigning meaning to that first order reality. And so the accent, you might say, sounds weird, sounds different, and you may attach certain things, meanings, personal meanings, to the accent that you hear. Second order realities don't reside in objects or events. They're not physical properties necessarily. But rather they are meanings that we attach and they reside in our minds. So there's a sense in which meaning is something that is created within each of us. So the words that I use are a way of me encoding my ideas. When you hear those words, you decode those ideas and you create or assign meaning to them. Communication problems occur, as the text says, when we mistake second-order realities, our constructed interpretations, for first-order realities. Let's look at a little bit more in depth as to what are the steps in the perception process. The first thing is selection. We are bombarded by information, far more than we can possibly manage or attend to. And so the first step is to select that which we're going to attend to or listen to. And there's some factors that will cause us to notice some things and just ignore others, be oblivious to them. The first one is intensity. The louder, the larger, the brighter, these all stand out. Repetition. If it happens again and again, it tends to draw our attention. Third, if there's a contrast or change, we notice the contrast, we notice the change, and it stands out to us. After we've selected that which we're going to attend to, the next step is organization, and that is arranging what we have seen, what we have heard, what we have experienced in some meaningful way. And we use perceptual schema or cognitive frameworks to arrange things. So think of maybe your closet, and think of the hangers that you use to hang something on, your clothes on. And so what you see has a perceptual hanger, you might say, that you put on. You'll put whatever you see, the event, the interaction, you'll put it on a hanger into a closet. You hang it in a certain place. How do we organize? Well, we organize according to the following ways. One, physical. Is it beautiful or plain? Is it heavy or thin, young or old? Two, is it role-based? And that is that a person a student, an attorney, a spouse, a teacher, a lawyer? Interaction, are they friendly, aloof, are they helpful, are they sarcastic and cynical? Psychological, is he or she confident, insecure, happy, or neurotic? So once we have selected information and we are organizing it according to some scheme, now we'll make some generalizations about the members of the group that we have assigned this person or this interaction into. And so we might say lawyers are usually, whatever you might say, are concerned about money. You might say teachers work hard. Very often these generalizations become almost stereotypes when we use the words always and never. We have to realize that something may fit a certain group or category, but not every person in that group is representative of that larger category. Okay, that's stereotypes. We can also organize specific communication transactions in different ways, and these have a powerful effect on our relationships with each other. And so theorists use the word punctuation to describe cause and effect, and very often we'll mistake an effect for a cause. It's like, let me give you an example. It's like a husband who comes home and he seems to be withdrawing, and the wife demands more. And it might be, and as she demands more, he withdraws more, she demands, and so you have this vicious cycle. She may perceive him as withdrawing, and so she demands more. On the other hand, he may be perceiving her as demanding, and so he withdraws more. So what's the cause and what's the effect? It depends on how you punctuate. What started first? So rather than argue about the punctuation of an event as to what's the cause and what's the effect, it's more productive to look at a dispute and realize that it's going to look different compared to each person, and then ask the question, what can we do to make things better? So first, selection, organization, then third, interpretation. We interpret in a way that makes sense to us. We attach meaning to data. And so it becomes more than just information. It becomes it becomes personalized. And so interpretation plays a role in virtually every interpersonal act. Several factors cause us to interpret a person's behavior in one way or another. If we're having a good relationship with that person, we'll more than likely interpret their actions as positive. On the other hand, if we are in a negative relationship, we'll interpret their actions as being negative. So that's relational satisfaction. The second one is expectation. If you go into a conversation expecting a hostile attitude, you'll interpret that person's attitude as being hostile. Third one is experience, a personal experience. Depends on your experience with this particular person. So it might be your personal experience with teachers, and if it's negative, you'll go into a conversation with that person with a negative expectation, based on your past personal experience. Personality. Study found that people with cold dispositions have difficulty interpreting and labeling the emotions of others. So it all depends on you and what your personality is like. Is it extrovert, introvert? Are you often very cynical, sarcastic? And then the last one is about assumptions about human behavior. What do you assume about humans in general? Do you assume that humans are lazy and dislike work? Or do you believe people generally exercise self-direction and self-control? So selection, organization, and interpretation are phases of perception, and sometimes they can occur in differing sequences. For example, parents or babysitters' past interpretations, such as Jason is a troublemaker, can influence future selections. His behavior becomes especially noticeable now, and the organization of events, when there's a fight, the assumption is that Jason started it. The next step is negotiation. So far, we've been looking at meaning in people. Now we want to look at how meaning is created among people. And this occurs through the process of negotiation. Negotiation is the process by which communicators influence each other's perceptions. So you don't draw a conclusion, or it's rare that you draw a conclusion in isolation. You usually draw a conclusion and then you compare it with someone else. So another way to explain this negotiation strategy is to view interpersonal communication as the exchange of stories. And narratives are the stories we use to describe our personal world. So virtually every interpersonal situation can be described by more than one narrative. And in this narrative, there's always a casting as to who is the hero and who is the villain. When our narrative clashes with somebody else's narrative, we can either hang on to our own point of view, our narrative, and refuse to consider someone else's, or we try to negotiate a narrative that creates at least some common ground. Shared narratives provide the best chance for smooth communication. Shared narratives, however, don't have to be accurate to be powerful. To be powerful, forgive me. They don't have to be accurate to be powerful. You might be very charitable in the way that you interpret somebody's behavior. All right, we'll stop there. The next segment, we'll look at influences on perception.